Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Abolitionist Storywork. My name is Aisha Williams, and I am Deputy Director at the Laundromat Project. For those of you who are new to our community, the LP is a Black-rooted, people of color-centered arts organization working at the intersection of arts, social justice, and community building. Since 2005, we have advanced artists and neighbors as change agents in their own communities. Thank you again for joining us for the final program of our two-day public program series, Abolitionist Storywork, Weaving Collective Narratives of Freedom, which is conceived of by Piper Anderson, the LP's Radical Imagination Fellow. This evening, we are presenting Remembering Ourselves Free, which will be a discussion of the collective healing power of gatherings grounded in story. Sorry about that. And what you're seeing on your screen right now is a Black and white image with the title of the program and the names of the participants. We'd like to begin the program by sharing a few access notes. The Laundromat Project is committed to hosting accessible and inclusive events. Real-time captioning is available for this program, provided by Kara, thank you, our captioner. You can turn captions on and off through the closed captions tab located on the features bar at the bottom of the screen. We'll also be recording today's session for archival purposes. The recording will be available on YouTube following the event. We also begin each public program with a land acknowledgement. We at the Laundromat Project respectfully acknowledge that our primary location of operations at 1476 Fulton Street in Brooklyn, New York, sits on the occupied and unceded lands of the Canarsie, who are part of the Montseal Nape. We recognize them as the original stewards of this land and pay respects to their elders, past, present, and future. I invite you to join me in acknowledging the histories of the land where you are currently gathered and pay respect and gratitude to its original stewards. And now for the program. This program is presented in collaboration with our inaugural Radical Imagination Fellow, Piper Anderson. Thank you, Piper. The fellowship is designed to engage the LP staff, board, and larger community around ideas and perspectives. The fellow's role was conceived to deepen our understanding around timely issues of abolition, healing justice, public memory, and the Black radical imagination. It is within that context that today's program came to be with Piper Anderson, our Radical Imagination Fellow. Piper has been working with us for 9 months and leading sessions with our community and has organized this series of timely and urgent programs. Piper has also been involved in abolitionist and storytelling work for a very, very, very long time, and we are deeply grateful to be in community with her and excited to share these conversations with you. Transforming narratives of punishment demands a reckoning with the past while keeping our feet planted in the direction of the future we want to create. Abolitionist story workers use narrative strategies to reflect on our shared experiences of criminal punishment and state violence as a starting place for building a shared vision for a world free of systems of punishment. And throughout this two-day convening, we hope that you have, if you joined the previous programs and today, learn, imagine, dream, and weave stories of abolition alongside these brilliant practitioners working in oral history, community archive development, and interdisciplinary range of narrative justice strategies to create community care, safety, and liberation. And for today's program, or this evening's program, we are joined by Amita Swadhin of the Mirror Memories, Jonel Beauvais of Welcome Home Circle, Emilce Quiroz of Common Justice, and the conversation will be moderated by Piper Anderson of Create Forward. We will share the link in the chat where you can access everyone's bio. And now I am thrilled to turn it over to our moderator, Piper. Welcome, Piper.
Thank you, Aisha. I feel like every time the LP staff has done that intro, an additional very has been added to it. Piper's been doing this work a very, very, very long time. Every time it's like, okay, all right, yeah.
All love and respect and honor.
It's been a very long time. It's been 2 decades at this point. And so I'm really grateful to be here this evening. My name is Piper Anderson. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I am a brown-skinned Black woman wearing teal glasses and a off-white colored sweatshirt. And there's a blue chair behind me and gray walls and way too many doors. And I am the great-granddaughter of Tempe and John, and the granddaughter of Marie and William, and the daughter of Richard and Mary. And my ancestors are my roots, and they guide my path as I do my work as a story worker and facilitator and healer. And I am really grateful that over the last day and a half, I've been able to bring together so many people that I really admire their work, and some of them family, like Amita, who I've known for more than 2 decades at this point. And Jonel, who I met through the Center for Justice and heard her speak, and was like, oh, I gotta find a way to work with that person at some point. And then we found this opportunity. And then Emilce, that I'm just meeting now, but am really excited to be connecting with, because I really respect the work of Common Justice. And so I'm really grateful that they have all said yes and agreed to be a part of this conversation that we are calling Remembering Ourselves Free. Each of them, has committed to using narrative strategies that create healing and justice, that centers communities and imagines a future free of prisons and policing, where a future where we can be accountable to each other and work to repair harm. And while throughout the last day and a half, we've mostly talked about stories and oral histories and archival processes, I want to remind us that there are just so many different narrative strategies out there, right, that people are working from. Some of them include ritual, include ceremony, include circle work, include spell making, include gatherings of all kinds that center repair and transformation. And so I'm excited that we get to sort of, have that conversation here today. And so with that, I'm going to, in a moment, open it up and invite each of them to introduce themselves. If you want to read their bios, they can go to the link. And so I have a series of questions that I'm going to pose to them and guide the conversation for the next 45 minutes or so, or longer. And then we are going to invite those of you who are joining us to pose your questions in the Q&A feature within Zoom, and we'll be getting to those questions in the last 20 minutes or so. So, introductions. I want to invite each of you to share, who are you? Who are your people? What is the land that you stand on? And what stories, why do stories matter to you, to your work? Jonel, will you start us off? Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Piper, and to everybody else who rolled out this beautiful red carpet for us. And I really like the practice of talking about the image of my background. And so I guess just to get a visual of me before I say my names, because I think I have a couple of them, but I got a long mirror on the back wall with a little plant dripping over it, and there's like a white lampshade and some white sheer curtains, and the sun's going down right behind me, and I got a couple paintings up on the wall, and the walls are like a light gray color. So I just want to tell you that the feel in my house and my living room is very blue, green, grayish, and I think it helps keep me calm because I can not be calm sometimes. So with that being said, now that I got the background to match the introduction, I just wanted to say my English name is Jonel Beauvais, and my Ganyakahaga, my Ungwahua name would be Goyanahawis, which is interpreted as she's carrying the road, and also she's carrying the footprints of the creator. I'm Wolf Clan here. I'm from Akwesasne. I'm Ganyakahaga, which has also been known to be Mohawk, which we are the Eastern doorkeepers of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, over here in the East Coast. So I just wanted to say that much to you about my names and a little bit of my background. Thankfully, I'm on my motherland, and I feel pretty good about that. I'm trying to get some more of it back. So if you know anybody that's like donating some land, I'd like to get some of this land back. And also, I just wanted to say, the stories. Yeah, so stories are, wow, I think they're great captions of memory and time and truth, and they are so full of different insights and perspectives. I really enjoy listening to people's stories and have told my own a million times, and I still cry about it and I still walk myself through it. But I think they're so important because it allows us to generate inside ourselves another level of thinking and brilliance when we're storytelling, when we're hearing about people's experiences. And it's another form of intimacy that I think is really important for people to feel, especially at a time when we are not very connected spiritually or energetically to a lot of things, and feel disconnected from a healthier source of society and environment. So, you know, there's a lot to be said on that, but I told Piper I was going to be good. I'm long-winded, and I'm going to end it there and then pass it on to Emilce. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonel. So my name is Emilce Quiroz. My people are my parents. My mother is Emma Quiroz. My father is Jonel Quiroz. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who I'm very, very thankful. I think of her as like basically a mother, which is sometimes a weird relationship with my father, because when I'm around her, I'm like, oh, you're my sibling with my father, which is great because I would have chosen him as my father anyway. My people were originally from Michoacan, Mexico. They are the Purepecha, obviously with a little bit of some other colonizer stuff in there too, but we won't mention them. I stand today on the sacred land of the Lenape people here in Brooklyn, New York. And stories are extremely important in the work that I do. I would say that the most important stories that we tell, and what my life's passion is really all about, is not so much of a telling of stories, but a retelling of stories, or an undoing of stories, because I think a lot of the stories that we tell about Black and Brown people and their relationship to violence, not just in this country, but on this continent, are falsehoods. So I really want to retell our stories through our own voices, and not in the way that we've been told to see ourselves or to think of ourselves. And I think that that's really important in my life's passion. So with that, I'll pass it to Amita.
Thank you so much. And thank you to my dear friend Piper for this invitation to be here with you all today. I'll do an access check-in as well. I am a light brown skin, non-binary femme person. I have black hair that's cut into some kind of weird COVID bob situation with some bangs, and that's quickly graying. I have a gold frame wire glasses on, eyeglasses, and some white Apple headphones, and a black t-shirt that says "Don't Stop Believing" with a unicorn and a rainbow on it. And I'm sitting against a turquoise wall in my home office. I am living on unceded and occupied Tongva land, or sometimes known as Kizh land, which is also known in colonized terms as Los Angeles County. I'm in the San Gabriel Valley, in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains. And I grew up primarily from the age of 1.5 years onwards on Lenape land in and around New York City and in northern New Jersey. I was born on Shawnee land, also known in very colonial terms as Columbus, Ohio. I am the first person in my lineage to be born outside of the South Asian subcontinent. My people come from 3 different lineages. We are from an upper caste lineage on all of those sides. Hindu society in a casteist way is broken into these really messed up oppressive caste segregations. And so my people are from an oppressor lineage before the Europeans came to that subcontinent, Brahmin and Kshatriya lineages specifically, because my parents chose to marry each other, and then my mom's parents chose to marry each other instead of having arranged marriages. I'm actually from a very mixed background in my own people's lineages, from lands as far as Afghanistan and Central Asia on my dad's side, through Pakistan and to Punjab. And then on my mom's side from Uttar Pradesh and occupied territories in West Bengal, meaning my people occupied those territories in West Bengal. And then my grandmother, who is Maharashtrian and Kshatriya. And the people in my lineage who I have the most ties to are very much the female assigned people in my mother's lineage. So I am Swapna's daughter, who is the daughter of Mandakini, who is the daughter of Shanta, who is the daughter of Janaki. And I have a lot of respect for their attempts to shift away from the generational harm that our lineage has caused through attempts like joining socialist freedom movements against the Europeans, joining I don't know that they use the term feminist, but joining like women's liberation movements and anti-caste movements. And I always have such deep respect and gratitude to my grandmother Mandakini for making the decision to leave the subcontinent and come to Turtle Island, which is a very complex decision because it means my people have an opportunity to live differently away from the generational violence of patriarchy and caste. But then what does that mean to have a chance at your own lineage liberation on someone else's occupied land? So I very much feel guided by the North Star of Black and Indigenous liberation and the liberation of Turtle Island itself, and try to be in service of that goal in the work that I do around stories. And I'll just close by saying why stories matter to me. Being a diasporic person, being the first person in my lineage to be born outside of our homeland, there's always a really complex relationship to language. I don't speak any of my mother tongues, but the opportunity there is that from what I understand, in none of my mother tongues is there a word for rape and for the violence of rape. I'm a survivor of rape by my father. I am a survivor of a lineage in which female assigned children were considered the property of the male assigned people in our lines. And so stories are a way of trying to name this culturally sanctioned violence, institutionally sanctioned violence, generationally sanctioned violence, so that we can end it. Because as James Baldwin very eloquently said, you know, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I find that the magic of stories is allowing us to name not only what needs to change, but some of our collective visions and dreams for what a world that is different can look like, and perhaps how we can fumble our way to getting there. Thank you so much for allowing me to share space with you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Emilce?
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry, I forgot to describe myself and my surroundings. So for anyone who might be visually impaired, I am wearing a brown vest, a white t-shirt, some white Apple headphones. I have a pothos plant hanging right by my head, which may or may not be distracting for everyone else. I'm in a white living room, and there are lots of little plants and stuff hanging on the walls behind me. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you, Piper.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. Thank you all for sharing. You know, I heard, you know, that stories are about reclamation, about intimate connection, about naming, so that we can both end violence, but also so that we can dream together as well. One of the things that came up last night as we were talking about this is that, you know, we can also reframe so many of our narratives that seem to be on the surface about violence. We can really rethink of them as narratives of resistance, of survival, and that in the telling of those narratives, they're also the antidote, right? The medicine that we seek is often in the story as well. But in order to do that, we have to do a little bit of sort of, kind of alchemy. So, my next question to all of you is, what are the narratives that you feel really called to transform? What are the narratives that you feel called to transform? Amita, you want to start us off?
Sure. So, the work of Mirror Memoirs is very broadly about intervening in rape culture with a goal of ending rape culture. And I think the specific stories we're uplifting in this project, especially of Black and Indigenous, Two-Spirit, transgender, non-binary, and intersex people who survived rape and sexual assault as children, all point to wanting to reshape and needing to reshape the narrative of how rape happens, to whom and by whom. I think we're living in a time of a lot of opportunity because more and more people are talking about sexual violence, but there still seems to be, mostly in the conversations I'm privy to outside of Mirror Memoirs, a misperception that sexual violence is about a unidirectional arrow of harm from cisgender men towards cisgender women and girls. And actually, when you look at a lot of the studies that have been done and haven't really trickled their way into organizational and narrative change movement organizations, the American Academy of Pediatrics has put out a study about 10 years ago that gender nonconformity in children is actually a risk factor for experiencing childhood rape and sexual assault. And that gender nonconformity is the biggest risk factor for children who were assigned male at birth and who are ages 11 to 17 years old. So what that means to me is that we should all be looking to the leadership of children who were assigned male at birth and are gender nonconforming, and who make it to adulthood, who are resilient and brilliant and have found ways to survive. That's trans femmes, trans women, intersex people who were assigned male at birth, and non-binary people who were assigned male at birth. I think along with understanding the complexity of who violence happens to, there's the complex discussion of who commits violence. In Mirror Memoirs audio archive, we have 60 recorded stories across 15 states from queer and trans folks of color who are child sexual abuse survivors, 9% of whom were raped or sexually assaulted by a cisgender woman. And that actually maps to data that exists in the world of research as well, but almost never gets talked about. And so that's one intervention, I think, in terms of the narratives that we're trying to transform. Finally, I think everybody's story points to often generational violence and certainly state violence, sexual violence, rape on an individual level by people who are imbued with agency and power as representatives of the state. So people who were raped by Border Patrol, people who were raped by Immigrant Detention Center officers, people who were raped by police or prison guards, people who were raped by employees of state-funded psychiatric institutions. And we're talking about children, right? All of this sexual assault that in Mirror Memoirs that's being discussed, it happens before the age of 18. And so if we can't trust employees of the state to keep us safe, it really, I think, automatically points the way towards abolition, and everything that is considered abolitionist strategies or experiments that we have to let go of, relying on state systems because they're causing harm. And then finally, the binary, a very false binary between who's a survivor and who's a perpetrator. In most of our stories, we see that this is a learned behavior. A lot of people are coming from lineages where there has been survivorship, and then the next generation survivorship, and the next generation survivorship. And so really needing to move away from punishment narratives. And I know we'll talk about that later today, but just being able to hold the complexity in our stories that some of the same people who have committed sexual violence have also survived sexual violence as children themselves, and understanding that we need to let go of the false narratives of heroes and monsters if we really want to transform rape culture.
Thank you, Amita. Emilce, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yes, thank you, Anita. That was extremely powerful. And a lot of the subjects that you touched on are subjects that we try to touch on as well at Common Justice. You know, some of the narratives that we work to transform are that prisons and jails produce safety and accountability or even justice, right? That's the narrative that we have been spoon-fed since the beginning of this country. And the truth is that our current criminal justice system really does neither one of those things. Prisons and jails are secure. They are secure, they are hard to get out of, but they do not produce safety. They don't produce safety for our communities, and they don't produce safety for the people that are held within them, which is today abundantly clear with what's happening at Rikers Island, which just had a 12th person die this year, a 24-year-old man named Stefan Kadu, because he was not, they failed to give him proper medical attention at Rikers Island, and not to mention the numerous deaths that have occurred in the past several decades at Rikers Island, or that have happened after people were released, like people like Khalif Browder. And yet we continue with this narrative that prisons and jails produce safety. But for whom do they produce safety? I think, you know, just to be abundantly clear, I think they produce safety for the white community, right? Because it shields them from having to see how many Black and brown people truly live in their communities, right? If you take them out of their community, you put a wall up, you put Black and brown people behind these walls, it gives them a false sense of security, right? And that's something that we are trying to shift. The other thing is this idea of violence, right? That people who cause violent harm are inherently evil people who should be separated from everyone else, when the truth is that people who cause violent harm are survivors of traumatic violence, of trauma and severe violence, right? And if we really want to stop violence in our communities, we should get to the root problem of violence, which is systemic as well as it is interpersonal. So just this idea that people who cause violent harm are so much different than the people that they cause harm to as well, that they're inherently different people, that survivors and perpetrators, we call them responsible parties at Common Justice, that they're inherently different is a lie. A lot of the time, especially with our participants, we see that it just happens to be who was arrested that day, right? It might have been this person harming this person for a while, and then this person retaliates. And then that's when the police interaction happens. And so this person is seen as the violent, you know, criminal, whereas this person is seen as a survivor. And not to say that's bad, that both of them are bad, or, you know, one is inherently good or one is inherently evil, which is not true for me. It's not true for any human being I've ever met in my life. You know, nobody is inherently good or inherently evil or just all one thing or the other. And I think that's what we're trying to undo, right? Is this idea that you're either inherently good or you're inherently evil. And we just can't have those kinds of conversations when it comes to violence, because violence is a symptom of violence. And what really causes violence in most of our communities is, you know, capitalism, is colonization, is racism, is environmental violence. So until we get to the root of all those things, until we begin to heal those things, only then can we really heal our communities. The prisons and jails will never do that.
Thank you, Emilce. Jonel?
Yeah, wow, great. Oh, wow, I just want to like touch base on so much of that, but I'm going to focus and I'm going to like say that I think I needed to change my narrative. And I didn't realize for a long time that I always felt victimized, but didn't say it. So me feeling victimized would show up as me trying to be maybe extra emotionless or extra tough or extra whatever. But I feel like part of until recently, having been formerly incarcerated, so I went to prison for a couple years, and I was able to come home, and I was able to get a job addressing domestic violence and sexual assault within my community for the past 6 years. And so in the process of all this violence happening within the community, having been in prison and then now addressing violence within the community towards women and children and our men, I include them all because they're a family, and we got to include the whole family. And then also, being able to have some cultural teachings to support the consciousness. So I think that what happens is, so in this roundabout way, there's a couple ways I wanted to go with this, but what I wanted to say is that when we're conscious of ourselves, when we're fully developed within ourselves, that's a huge prevention of violence right there. Because when you're in alignment with who you are, you're a lot less likely to harm yourself and somebody else because you're content, right? Like you're not like needing power from anybody, like you're self-sustaining. And so I think that a lot of this not knowing comes from institutions. So we're birthed in institutions, we're forced to attend schooling in institutions, then we probably end up one in prison, you'll work in an institution, you'll die in an institution. So every part of your life is institutionalized. What's missing in those institutions, because a lot of them are formulated by power and control, right? And it's man-made, it's not it's not a natural law, it's a man-made law of organizing, and it's an oppressive system. So anyways, my thought about that was while we're going through these institutions and we don't ever take the time to understand shame. We don't take the time to understand disappointment, abandonment, grief, rejection, all of these things. So there's no time in there to understand you as a human being, as an entity, as a system. So if you don't understand your system, you will constantly stumble throughout the world because the world is telling you how to function and you're not telling it, right? This is who I am. This is what I'm about. This is my name. This is what my capacity is. This is my gift to the world. So oftentimes the institution doesn't flourish us in those ways. It actually minimizes us. It's designed to control the way in which we live, eat, think, everything. And they're forced institutions. So what happens is when we have everybody not knowing themselves or their feelings or how to adjust or adapt or reflect or share or speak or communicate, right? Now we have a whole generation, a couple generations that are like, my marriage isn't working. I can't connect with my kids. The institution forces my children to be with them more than it does home with me. We know that through childbirth. We know that in every facet of our lives, we are all fighting, right? To say like, hey, like this is like a part of mother law. So in my culture and in my background, matriarchs, women were the law, mothers were the law. Right? And so no man could hold any representation or authority without the nomination of the women in his family. He could never represent anything or anybody without the consensus of the women. He had to know and have the respect and reverence of those women. And they watched him from birth all his life to see what his characteristics were. Did he have a family? How is he, so all of those things got to take into consideration. With colonialism and institutionalism, all that gets taken away. And now we're all trying to find ways to connect again. We're having to relearn or unlearn some stuff, right? Relearn that we were whole people and we're naturally designed. We are seeds. And if anybody plants a seed, the seed actually has all the intelligence it needs inside of it. You don't have to do anything to that seed. It knows exactly what it needs to grow and to thrive. We have to be the soil to that seed and say, do you have your nutrients? Do you have your oxygen? We're not here to tell the seed what to do. We're here to tell the seed, do what you need to do for you. right? And I think that's the consciousness that needs to wake up. Is every time I've ever done a presentation with youth or anybody for that matter, the only thing everybody wanted to feel that was consistent every time was acceptance. Nobody feels accepted, and acceptance is the last part of sometimes in our process of grief, right? When we just accept ourselves and our all these things. So I wanted to lean into the institution with that, because I think it's really important. And then on top of that, there's absolutely like all the misconceptions about Indigenous people. I sit on a border, so I am loaded to the nines in policing, on 2 countries, right? On like all this other extra stuff. Like I've grown up in an environment that was heavily policed, and that's basically all I know is to report to custom and all this other stuff. So on top of navigating all of that, I really was also trying to change the narrative within my community and say that, if our consciousness doesn't change around punitive punishment or justice or any of that, it doesn't matter what I build or what I create, because the people are not in agreement with it. So the effort has been to educate the people so that when there is something initial, you're met with more support than resistance. And thankfully, the community and its collective consciousness said, okay, we're ready for this. We're ready to take the next step and lean into something that's more sovereign, more community oriented, owned by the community, ran by the community, and you have full ownership of this. And so I really wanted to find a way for them to be proud of this, because I'm telling you, Indigenous, my community, we don't have anything, absolutely zero, nothing at all, until just recently we were able to develop this organization. So it's been a beautiful ride. I know that there's a lot of families, nobody suffers more for this system than children do. They are the least represented, the least visible victims in this whole system, and have the least amount of floor time. And I think that it's so important to listen what happens to these children, the systems that they get thrown into, the violence that they end up facing, and the harm that they end up causing themselves, because they're lacking all the nutrients that they were supposed to get from their parents. And now we have another generational adversity coming into the family, and more reason to find unhealthy ways to cope if they're not accessible, right? So anyways, obviously I can go on a lot about this, but I just wanted to tell you that those are just some of the narratives that I'm trying to change. So thank you, Piper.
Thank you, Jonel. Something that you said that just sort of landed right on my chest was about, we don't know how to talk about shame or grief. And I think that in all of the work that you all do, and I think, and even for myself, I think that is something that comes up constantly, right? So many part of the reason why we don't tell many of these stories is because of the shame and the grief. And the shame and the grief, which like, if you don't give it air, it just sort of, it metastasizes it, and just becomes this thing that really just causes so much damage, both within the body, but also in our relationships and our families and our communities, right? Because it just spreads. And yet I feel like the work that you all do is really creating space to give air to that, to give people space to feel accepted, to be seen, to be held as they're telling those stories. And it feels like there's an element of care work, of ritual, of ceremony that's a part of that. And so I would love for any of you, and I'll just open this up to whoever wants to respond to it, is like, what's the role of ritual or ceremony in your work?
Oh, I got a good one. This is really good. I just want to let you know, get ready for this, because this was like, wow, it just totally like helped me out and helped many. So you're going to really appreciate this, Amita and Emilce, because so this is what happened. So I was coming out of prison, and I was still wanting to advocate for the people in coming home from prison, but I was doing domestic violence and sexual assault. So I'm seeing all this violence happen in the community. And then our sexual assault and DV program got a men's division. And so when the men came in, we were now working with men. And all of a sudden we had more men at our building trying to get help than there would be women sometimes, with talking circles and different activities. So I got to learn a lot from their healing process, how they were coming in, why they were coming in, like getting, you know, really vulnerable. And all of these guys that were leading them were all guys that had went to jail, you know, went through addiction. So they knew their stuff. They knew how to like meet them where they were at. They had the tools, all that. So listen to this. I met a lady one time who wrote a book. She was Indigenous and she wrote a book, and she healed from her assault. Like I thought it was pretty soon from when she wrote the book to, so I asked her, right, I'm like, what helped you heal so soon? Because oftentimes in advocacy, to be honest, I'm trying to get the victim to not harm themselves afterward. So it's a very common thing, right? Like I'm actually trying, I don't want you to hurt yourself 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months after this. And that's a common thing. When someone is harmed, they will then in turn harm themselves in some shape or form. And that self-mutilation is devastating, because then you got to get them to figure out how to not harm themselves because they were harmed. So anyways, so what we ended up doing one night is my partner did 10 years in federal prison, and he had a couple brothers in there. And it just so happened to be that one of his brothers was working with me. So I said, you know what? So these guys who had all went to prison together, they learned this pipe ceremony. And this pipe ceremony, you take tobacco and you collect prayers from everybody and you load it in the pipe and you smoke it, and there's songs that go with it, and it's real nice, you know? So this is what happened. This lady who told me about how she healed better, she says after her assault, the men in her family, her uncles, all the men in her family, they took her in this room and they sat across from her and they said, we want you to give us the harm that was given to you by a man, because it doesn't belong to you. And we want you to give it back to us. And in turn, we're going to give you the love from men that you should know. The love from men that says, I'm going to provide, I'm going to protect you, I love you, I'm here for you. And so what they did is they sang to her. They sang songs to her, and that was their way of saying, like, you're not alone in this. And she was able to bounce right back up. And so one night I had a young girl, had an assault with her boyfriend, was struggling, right? The family, there was just a lot. There's always a lot going on. But so one night I said, you know what? I told her, I said, we could try this pipe ceremony. And she said, okay. So she came in, the family came in. And you know what? Those 3 men that all went to prison together, that were all, you know, came home, were trying to do good, get on their feet, be family men. They ran that ceremony and they sang those songs. And all the men in her family and all those men that come out of prison helped that young girl let go of some of her trauma. And they told her, we're going to sing to you. And they sang loud and proud. And there was a whole energetic reciprocity that was happening. Like everybody felt good about seeing this natural reconciliation. So without him taking any responsibility, the pride of men in your community says, hey, this young girl belongs to us, right? And we're not going to let you go down. Where as men, we're going to show up as healthier men today, because all those men were probably guilty in one way or another of hurting a woman at some point in their lives. And the men themselves got to see each other showing up for this young girl and offering her words of encouragement. And I know that's like in a lot of ways that could be really risky and there's a lot of whatever, but in that instance, on that night, we made magic, we made medicine. And that young girl and those men in that room, all of us got to feel good about dissolving the harm that was inside of her and that had trickled into the rest of the family. And now we're a little bit closer and tighter for that, because that's what family is about. It says we won't go through anything without each other. We're going to buckle down and we weather the storm together and we come back out the other side. And then it was able to build relationships. And I just thought, wow, you know, we're sitting on a wealth of people that a society likes to throw away. And here they are showing back up, trying without anybody watching or needing any recognition, and saying, I genuinely want to be here because this is important to me. And I'm not the same person that maybe I was yesterday or a couple years ago. So, you know, I just think those stories are important. And I can't wait to get back into making more of those. So there's us there. I got lots of ceremony for you, Piper, but we only got like a few minutes here.
You're muted, Piper.
Darn it. I was just saying thank you, Jonel. That's powerful. Yeah, Amita or Emilce, either one of you also want to respond to that question, the role of ritual ceremony in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, you know, everything that I have learned about circle practice, it's an indigenous practice. And I mean that in the broadest sense, right? Like there are indigenous people from the African continent, indigenous people here on Turtle Island, and in a project rooted in the liberation of children living on Turtle Island, right? Like I said, in Mirror Memoirs, we really try to follow the leadership of Black and Indigenous survivors, particularly those who are trans and gender nonconforming or queer. What we have found is that in doing practices that are somewhat universal, like sitting in circle and bearing witness to one another, we are breaking like the medicine of just that act, whether it is in the one-on-one story, like, you know, the interviews that we do that get recorded for our audio archive. We began each of those with creating an altar. I had a traveling altar that was actually created through objects that were gifted to me by other survivors who are in the Mirror Memoirs population. So like a silk cloth from one of the Khmer refugee survivors who's in our community, and a bundle of feathers from a Blackfoot Indigenous survivor, and crystals from a different survivor, shells from another, right? And I was taught how to create altar by Shashyaja Charlie, who is a trans Dene medicine person who I've known for 15 years. And I really am grateful to Shashyaja for teaching me. If I'm going to be on the road, I traveled an average of every 2 weeks for 3 years all over Turtle Island to bear witness to other survivors. And I found that telling the story of the objects, a lot of people who I interviewed I had never met before. Some were some of my best friends, but a lot I had never met before. And it's a strange way to meet someone, to say, I'm here to witness this deep wound that you actually never talk about. And it helped people get comfortable just hearing, like, what are the objects that I'm laying in front of you and that I'm arranging in this space as we settle into being in our bodies together to mirror. Like, our brains have mirror neurons as human beings. It's this amazing thing. And they can release things like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin when the storyteller feels witnessed and affirmed and respected. Like the magic, the medicine, like Jonel is talking about, comes from our togetherness. And the act of raping a child is an act of isolation. It's an act, like Jonel also said, of like making a child ingest shame that is not their own, right? The shame of experiencing a very taboo form of harm. And so in the act of being witnessed and affirmed, you're creating a bond of intimacy. You're creating a bond of connection that is in and of itself a ceremony to alchemize the wound of isolation, to alchemize the wound of being torn apart from community, often from family. Many of the people in our archive were harmed by their immediate family members, whether it was through the act of rape or through a transphobic act of shame and stigma because of your gender identity or your queerness. So we're alchemizing all of that. And I would say some of the most profound moments for me in Mirror Memoirs have actually been when we started to weave collective spaces together, where after we had our initial audio archive recorded, we would do national convenings. And we've had about 6 of those, obviously before the pandemic. And just to sit in the room, just by opening the door and stepping foot into the room, you're automatically declaring with your body, I am here because I am a queer or trans, Black, Indigenous, or person of color who was raped or sexually assaulted as a child. And so there's so much you don't have to say, right? Once you're in the room, because we can all look around the circles of anywhere between 30 to 40 people and just marvel at like, wow, here we are to heal this particular wound together and create community and interdependence and circles of care with one another. So I'm grateful for the unfolding ritual every day. And I'll just close by saying we just named our new theater project. We're producing a theater project this fall that's going to be virtual. We're filming it in Los Angeles in November. It will be streamed at the end of November. And it features 4 Black and Afro-Latinx assigned male at birth survivors of childhood rape who live their lives as trans women, intersex femmes, and non-binary femmes. The play is called Transmutation, a Ceremony, because that's what we have found this work to be about. There's a medicine in weaving together stories that point to systemic and cultural violence that has been so normalized over generations that it's literally the water that we're swimming in. And a fish doesn't know it's in water because it's just the water, right? Similarly, we don't all often know the dominant culture of harm we're in until someone adds a little food coloring, right? So Mirror Memoirs is attempting to be the food coloring. We're attempting to call people into ceremony by sitting in virtual circle with us to listen to the stories that no one wants to hear, and to see people's power, to see not the shame of it, right? We're giving that back. And to say, like, we are strong, we are resilient, we are finding ways to survive the unthinkable, and we have some answers for a world without this violence, because it's the world that we need in order to be free, living at these intersections. So that's some of the ritual and ceremony that we weave together.
Thank you. Emilce, did you want to respond to that one?
Sure. So one of the roles of ritual and ceremony in our work at Common Justice as an alternative to incarceration for violent crime in the adult courts, we're a restorative justice-based program. So a key part of our program is the Restorative Justice Circle, right, which is an Indigenous practice. And it's really important for both the harmed party and the responsible party. There is no going forward without this circle happening. And it's healing for both of them, which you wouldn't expect a lot of the time for it to be healing for the responsible party as well. But and a lot of the things that Amita was saying was there's this exchange, right? This energy exchange and like this mirroring of neurons, right? That is happening when someone tells their story, or when you're forced to face the person that you harmed, or that harmed you, and hear from them directly while you're looking at them, while they're staring at you, why this happened, right? Because a lot of times there's a misunderstanding that leads to violence, a misunderstanding on one person's side or the other person's side that can get clarified only in the restorative justice circle, which does not happen in the current criminal legal system, right? And so that is a key element of our program. And it's been super healing for both the responsible parties and the harmed parties as well. And we don't record any of that. It's all it's a personal, it's a personal moment, and each person is allowed to bring 2 people to support people with them into the room. And it's just been an overwhelmingly positive experience for both parties. And I think when we think about violence and violent harm, because we do address severe violence in our program, a lot of people think that restorative justice won't be enough to get accountability or justice for people, but it's, you'd be surprised how healing it is for the harmed parties that choose to participate in our program, right? Because it is a choice. They can easily say, no, I want that person to go to prison, right? I want them to rot in jail for what they did to me. They can say that. and we would be like, okay, you know, but 90% of the time they choose to come through this program. And I think that we should look into that more. Like, there is something that is missing in our criminal legal system. There's something too sterile about our criminal legal system that does not allow survivors to get answers or to get what it is that really will truly heal them. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that it is an Indigenous practice that causes that healing to happen. And I think that we just need to, like what Jonel was saying, was just get more in touch with ourselves and who we are. And so much of who we are as Black and Brown people has been sterilized, and our histories have been erased. And we've been taught to be ashamed of our history and ourselves and our lineage. And I think that that in itself is inherently violent. And I think, and that's also part of our program, is because most of our participants are young Black and Brown people, right? And part of the program is kind of teaching them who they are and where they come from and who their ancestors may have been, right? And what role they play in this society. And the ways that they've been taught to see themselves living in this society, and undoing a lot of that. So that's the role that ritual and ceremony plays at Common Justice.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, as each of you were speaking, it made me think about the fact that that, you know, trauma isn't what happened to you, right? Trauma is also not a given, right? So trauma is the result of how the people around us have responded after we experience harm, right? And so what you all described is, you know, this beautiful ideal, right? Like harm happens. It's, you know, it's going to happen. And yet there are ways in which when we experience harm, that we can be accountable to each other, in which we can directly face what has happened and bear witness and work towards repair and to heal. And none of that happens in the process. And that is what creates trauma, right? And so, you know, what if, you know, we showed up immediately in song, in ceremony, in circle, in prayer with each other when harm happened? Of course, that would mean the end of a white supremacist settler colonial capitalist system that is dependent on punishment, that is deeply dependent on punishment being the primary way in which we operate with each other, in our interpersonal relationships, within our systems, within our institutions. And so I'm curious about, you know, what you all think are some ways that we could transform this sort of dominant culture's focus on punishment, and create more community accountability and care and healing, like the ways that you all talked about in your work.
I wanted to lean into this. So I guess, and I'll speak about my community. Like you said, like oftentimes, right, like the survivor and the person who's caused harm are one and the same person. And I think for me, being in a somewhat of a close-knit community, right, like we're very aware of like how people grew up, right? You were very aware of like how that, like, you know, their family, what they went through, you know, so you knew if they had like 2 tragedies that somewhere or lost, you know, that it wasn't uncommon to see them like, right, like you see them drinking more, or there's something, you know, next, you know, this, they're you know, there's just stuff unraveling in their lives. And I'm actually really, I'm really proud of my community right now, because they're really showing up in ways that I kind of wasn't expecting. I really underestimated my community. And I feel like today that with, you know, being able to just show that there's visibility, I think especially being a woman, a young woman in my community talking about justice, trying to hold the line, trying to talk about children and visibility, representation more, and just knowing that there's possibility out there, right? So oftentimes our men are such a huge source of violence within the community, and there's just this reactive, instinctive, like, if you harm me, my only option in that moment is to harm you back, right? And there's no other, like, there's no other cultivating. And so when someone had brought up earlier about the intergenerational means of like harm and trauma, you know, I'm sure most of you are aware of the residential school children that are being unearthed in these Catholic cemeteries, also concentration camps for Indigenous children, which they called residential schools, right? So those were, so what happens is like they took that whole generation and they were strategic about that. They were strategic about targeting children because they knew that they could easily be influenced and that they could cultivate them, and we would really have no more Indian left in us, and there would just be another robot left, another puppet left for them to control and do all this and that. So, you know, I just wanted to say that, you know, I found that my community, or even, let's just say, even when I was in prison, my community became very, I've seen at times judgmental and oppressive themselves, where they couldn't see past their hurt. They couldn't, and that's what trauma does, right? They couldn't see past beyond harming that other person, or that's how somehow equates to healing, and it doesn't. And if there's nobody out there, right, willing to bear the brunt of talking about shame or owning their mistakes, and oftentimes we're like throwing around this rhetoric about accountability, but where do we see it? Do we see people in our families holding themselves accountable? Do we see people publicly hold themselves accountable? But nobody holds themselves accountable to anything, right? And so if we don't see that behavioral things play out, of course, so then when it's time to do it yourself, you're like, well, I really know how to, I'm good at deflecting. I'm good at manipulating this whole situation, but I've not once seen anybody, any adult, take responsibility for what they've done to me or anybody else, and I'm just going to follow suit. And so that conditioning really needs to just be transformed in places, and oftentimes they're vulnerable when they are in transition from these institutions, which is where we're usually trying to get in there, right? Trying to get services, trying to get resources, trying to show that there's a safe place for them to feel included, and that's organized and constructed for them personally. So anyways, I think that those dominant narratives of punishment have obviously super harmful. And the fact that, you know, someone equated locking to someone in a room for an extensive period of time somehow equates to accountability or justice at all is like mind-blowing. It's like, what does this actually really solve? Nothing. It has caused a ton of harm, a ton of like, and we're here cleaning up this, you know, mess that we didn't create, but we have children, right? We have family, we have an obligation ancestrally and to the 7 generations coming down the line. And so that's why, you know, I was mentored in a way to really take in my visibility as a female woman coming into this, a life-giving woman. And I just want to say, like, I've totally been able to appreciate the power of women and our brilliance, because every single woman came into this world, right, with a knowing, a woman's spirit or a physical, whatever the case, you come into this world with a knowing. And that's the knowing that we got to get back to, because that's what they don't want us to remember. They don't want us to remember our rituals. They don't want us to remember our language, our love, the way we care for our children. They don't want us to know who we are, because when you don't know who you are, they'll tell you. And that's exactly what they want to do. And with that, I'll leave that there.
I'll just jump in. There's so much that's been said, and I won't replicate it. Just like a big yes and thank you. One thing that we try to practice in Mirror Memoirs is moving away from the punishment culture that happens even in nonprofits that say that they are working for social justice, right? So what does it mean that we are 100% led by BIPOC, like Black, Indigenous, and of color, queer and trans people, who most of whom, not all of whom survived sexual violence in childhood, but most of whom then go on to have to navigate ongoing violence from the state, from civilian populations, often from our own communities and families. It's not like we're like, oh, let me just stop in my life of luxury now and reflect on the trauma I survived as a child, right? And so all of us are living with trauma-related mental health disabilities, chronic illnesses, in a US medical industrial complex term, right? We all qualify under the Americans with Disabilities Act for whatever that means or doesn't mean for us in terms of actual support. I name it to say we have, in the nonprofit world, in the tax shelter for wealthy people, that is the 501c3 industrial complex, right? Like essentially that is what has been set up. Many people smarter and more eloquent than myself on this issue talked about this, documented this in the Revolution Will Not Be Funded conference, which became a book coming out of Insight Women of Color Against Violence. So if you haven't read the book, please do. I had the blessing of being there live and in person to see Dr. Ruth Wilson Gilmore deliver that keynote. It's important, right? These structures that we're working within will not liberate us, but we still need to move the money to pay our people who have to survive within capitalism to do this work, right? And I'm working within a 501c3 fiscally sponsored project myself. That's what Memoirs is. I have a co-executive director. We have temporary employees and core members, all of whom get paid from our membership base. We cannot run an organization with white supremacist values of punishment and disposability when someone's mental health disability gets flared, when their chronic illness gets flared, when they get attacked by the police. Or we had one of our core members who's been a leader of the program since the beginning get brutally attacked and almost murdered in December, right? What would be the white supremacist nonprofit response, which she did have to endure at her place of work, which is a different nonprofit, was, oh, you're not able to show up and do your job. We've put you on disability leave for a month, but time's ticking, you got to come back to work, right? We don't do things that way in Mirror Memoirs. And sometimes it means we need to move slower with our deliverables. But what's a deliverable when you're working to end rape culture and white supremacy? Right? So I'm just naming that to say sometimes the dominant narrative of punishment exists in our heads and our hearts, and we enact it on each other, even in our movements that are supposedly working for liberation, right? We have to find ways to treat each other differently, even in the so-called workplace, because otherwise we're going to throw each other away when things go off the rails because violence is continuing. So I don't have an answer to it. We're humbly trying to practice it every day of what it means to take money from foundations and donors to do X, Y, and Z projects. And then a pandemic starts and everything spins on its side and we have to do things differently. We have an audio archive that was recorded between 2016 and 2018. And our big plan, we collected money to pay the graphic designer, the website designer, the audio editor, the story collectors to have a big release in 2020. You know what happened? Our website designer passed away. Our graphic designer got diagnosed with a chronic illness and then got COVID, and she's recovering now. Our storytellers were locked down in isolation, sometimes with their abusive family, sometimes not able to pay their rent, sometimes not able to eat. And I'm just saying this to name the times that we're all living in, right? We have to create structures that allow ourselves as people trying to foster liberation through stories, healing through stories, to pivot, to say, yeah, I did collect all the money from all these amazing supporters to release these stories into the world, and we are going to. That's coming, but I'm not doing it at the expense of my people. That's white supremacy culture, right? I'm not gonna put a deliverable before my people's well-being, because how is that any different than what we've been taught to do under colonial structures for 400 or 500 years? So, you know, the dominant narrative of punishment is also about our movements sometimes. And there's a lot to figure out together for what it really means to show up for one another inside of these structures and try to move our communities forward anyway.
Yeah, and just to, I think everything that's been said has been really beautiful. And I just want to add a little bit to what Amita was saying there at the end is at Common Justice, one of the things, like, you know, we can try to stop violence, we could try to end mass incarceration, but there's only so much that we can do within the nonprofit industrial complex. And when one of the main drivers of violence isn't inability to meet one's needs, to meet one's economic needs. How do we do that as a nonprofit organization, right? How do we can have an RP come into our program and have this transformational experience through a restorative justice circle, but we can't make them stop being poor. You know, how do we do that? How do we make them stop being homeless? There's only, because that's not something that we are equipped to do currently as a nonprofit, right? And I want to highlight this story because I thought it was so important. And when we're talking about movements to end incarceration and abolitionism, there was this young mayor, Michael Tubbs, in Stockton. I think he was only 27 years old. He was the mayor of Stockton, California. And he had a plan to give $5,000 to homes that were at the highest risk of causing violence. And he gave $5,000 to communities, and that dropped the incarceration rate in Stockton dramatically, right? So at what point do we can talk about ending violence and we can talk about, healing, but at one point does like capitalism itself is like a bottleneck towards like our movement, right? And so I'm not sure, I don't have the answers for that, but I just wanted to bring that one up because of what Amita was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the sharing of the archives of the stories of your processes is also part of that work as well. In a few minutes, we're going to be opening up the conversation for questions. So feel free to use the Q&A box to put any questions in the box, and we'll get to those in a moment. I'm curious, like all of you are doing work with, one, you're redefining what even, what we mean, breaking sort of these sort of either or thinking, the binary around perpetrator and victim, but you're holding space for people to share their experiences of violence. And having done that work for a long time, I know it costs you something to do that, right? I know it's is a lot to hold. And I'm wondering, really, this is just for me, I want to know what y'all do. I'm wondering how you care for yourself, right? Yeah, how do you care for yourself when you are holding space for so many people and really sort of facilitating such a powerful process of community healing? So yes, please share.
Okay. So to be honest, Piper, I didn't take care of myself like at all for the longest time. Like I heard a lot of like, you better take care of yourself. And I was like, if one more person says that to me, like, I'm just gonna, and that's all they could say was take it. But if the level of like survival mode, the level of like harm that was happening, I mean, it was like you drowned in it. And then don't take it home. And I brought it home and I slept in it and I rolled around and for years, not because it was too much. And I'm trying to take responsibility for the lack of support there was for advocates, the lack of structure changes that needed to happen within the community. So if I statistically have a community that has an 80% sexual assault rate, like at some point, and any person in my community's lifetime, they're going to be met with violence. And there's 3 women trying to address, right, thousands of incidences of rape and molestation and every horrific thing you can ever think of. I suffered. And as much as I tried to come back up and look cool, calm, and collected after a while, I thought if I turned all my anger about violence into power, it would sustain me. It worked. Trust me, you can get angry enough and pretty much do anything. And I don't think anybody would be on this panel if you weren't angry or enraged about something. But what happened was, is all that rage and all that anger after a while got to me, and I started having chest pains. I was having anxiety attacks left and right. I couldn't function. I couldn't sit still. I was emotionally a wreck. But if I got the call, boom, I'm back in work mode. I can push all that down. And then when I get home at night, nobody sees it more than my kids. Nobody's seen me crawl and all of this stuff more than my children, which was interesting because I was doing the work in light of my kids, right? Like, I want you to have a better community. I want you to see what it's like to get out there and be a part of your community and be engaged and, you know, advocate. And what I had to take responsibility for, and what I tried to show my children, and I apologized to them. I apologized to them because I had prioritized everybody's children but my own. I had prioritized everybody's pain but my own. And then I would be sitting there in the middle of the night, like not feeling enough. It wasn't enough. I didn't do enough. I didn't do this. I should have done that better. I messed up on that, and just continuously sit there and beat myself up. And I was like, what am I doing? This isn't adding up. This is, you know what I mean? So it took a pandemic. I mean, it took a pandemic for me to readjust. And I actually had to challenge my beliefs. I had to do an identity shed, and I had to challenge the beliefs that I was holding. And the beliefs that I was holding was that I was responsible for saving people. And it was rooted in me wanting to save my mother from cancer, and I couldn't, and all these other people I wanted to save. And I didn't even know how to save myself. And that's the reality of it. So, you know, I think today, taking ownership of that. So today, to be honest with you, Piper, in like the past 12 months, and to all the other ladies on the line here, like, I've learned to celebrate. I've never celebrated anything I've done, completed, got out of, anything. I just went back to work. What's the next 7 things we got to do? And I just finally this year started to try and like not pick up stuff that doesn't belong to me. Don't take things personally. Focus on yourself. Don't get distracted. And you know what? You go out there and you have some fun. You have some fun, because there's a lot of sadness in the world and there's a lot of suffering. But if you don't take some time to release that and to create your own world, it's rough, right? And so I would just say, like, it feels really good to be where I am today with myself. And I'm so, so grateful for that. So anyways, there's my my share.
And so much of that resonates with me, Jonel. Piper, this question, why are you trying to have this conversation publicly? Okay, Piper has been one of my close friends for over 20 years. One of the ways I take care of myself is being really intentional about who I'm close to. If you're not yet able, and I hope that we all get there in our quest for collective wholeness, but if you're not yet at a point in your own journey to be in the intersection of acknowledging grief, not running away from it, not numbing out to it, but like turning and facing it and allowing yourself to feel. Something I talk about a lot is like healing doesn't always mean you're going to feel good all the time. It just means you're going to feel. You're not numb anymore. You're here and you're present, right? And so I really enjoy my friendship with Piper and many other people, which are spaces that I can drop into and be like, I'm really sad. Shit is fucked up, you know, it's not okay. And like you said, Jonel, like I too made the mistake of when I first started doing work to end child sexual abuse in 1997, like feeling responsible for it, because I'm the oldest child in my family. I have many younger siblings and younger cousins. So I took it upon myself as a very young person, a 4-year-old, to try to protect my younger sister from our father's violence, from our mother's inability to be present and protect us, right? That's a burden that no child that young should ever have. And it's hard to unlearn that when that was the conditions you lived in for the first 16 years of your life. So the social justice nonprofits and movement organizations tend to encourage that, right? Yes, take on your entire people's burden and take it on as your personal responsibility to fix it by yourself. We don't create enough spaces to grieve together. It has to be part of the work, right? That there is a grief to growing up in a household like my own and realizing, oh, I thought I was getting out and now everything's going to be okay. But actually, what I lived through is very common and is a function of the collective pandemic of children being raped, right? This is a global pandemic, and that is not okay. That makes me sad to wake up every day and know that billions of children are being harmed every day in the way that I was harmed as a young person. That doesn't feel good, but it's not my responsibility alone to fix that. I can't. Some humility is really good there, right? And so who are the people I can be sad with? And then do they also have the skills to like create joy like Jonel is talking about? Can we cook together? Can we laugh together? I like to do karaoke. Sorry to all the people who hate it, but if you're my friend, you're probably going to get pressured to sing with me at some point. You know, can we just have fun together? Can we go appreciate the beautiful planet that we've all been gifted and watch a sunset together and dip our feet in the ocean and just have gratitude for that? Animals have been a big teacher for me. I have a beautiful emotional support pit bull whose name is Ginkgo, who's 9 years old now and who I've been a companion to since she was 3 months old. You know, she's taught me a lot about, she doesn't live in a state of grief and anxiety all the time, the way that humans do, because she's a dog, but she's also my relative, right? Like all living creatures are. And so what can other non-human relations teach us about just being present in this moment, and taking care of our needs and resting when we're tired and learning to be together and learning to cuddle and how good that feels, or get out of the house and walk. Oh, you're scrolling again on your phone. Oh God, mom, just please go outside and take me for a walk twice a day, right? Sometimes it's those little things. And then the plants have been a great teacher for me too, you know, medicinal fungi as well, which I know are not plants, but psilocybin has been a big part of my healing. In making the mistake of taking on 60 stories as my own pain, had the great privilege to go to Peru for my 40th birthday with Spring Washam and a Shipibo shaman who she's been working with for 25 years, and to do ayahuasca in a sacred ceremony. Like the earth has medicines for us, if we can be in right relationship with those medicines. And I'm grateful for those healing ways every single day.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's been a lot of the same as Amita. I am just now learning how to take care of myself. And for me, that looks like being myself completely, right? And that's something that as a queer Latinx woman is hard to do in my community, because there is so much violence against women and against queer people in my community. And that caused a lot of anger for me. But just getting in touch with, like, that's not really who my people are. That's not really who they're supposed to be. A lot of that was brought with colonization, right? The raping of women and the ostracizing of queerness and queer people. And so for me, the process of like decolonization and trying to spread those seeds within my family has been very difficult, but very rewarding, right? Having grown up in a very Catholic household where we were just Catholic for no reason, really. You know, it wasn't like it had any really spiritual, I never felt moved by Catholicism. It was just, we have to be there on Sunday and you shouldn't do that because you should feel guilty and you should feel shame. And I was like, okay, but this doesn't make me feel anything. I don't feel spiritually moved by this whatsoever. And trying to like plant those seeds in my parents, because I don't have children and I don't have nieces or nephews yet. And I'm not very close with my distant family. It's just very much like my immediate family. And so planting those seeds of like, does this really serve you to be so focused on labeling success as like your monetary value, right? And rather, or your child's monetary value, rather than their happiness and their like spiritual like unwinding or them going into themselves, right? Or does it really serve you to be a Christian if it doesn't heal you, right? If all it does is really damage you and hurt the ones you love and push people away. And so I was just in Mexico for a month, and that was the longest time that I've been there since I was a child. And it was just really beautiful to see how, I mean, it was beautiful and not so beautiful to see how, you know, if you go further south in Mexico, where there's a lot more of an indigenous, there are a lot more indigenous communities who are self-aware and who practice their, who are in their like cultural practice, versus those who are more north and are a lot more colonized, and there's a lot more violence there. And there's almost like a line that you can see where like it starts to get, you know, a lot more violent, and the machista culture and the homophobia starts to begin and crawl like a disease. Even though they live in this really beautiful place, right? That is so, like, the earth is so rich and abundant that all they can focus on is having the Nikes and the iPhones, the things that Americans have, right? The things that capitalism thinks that you should have in order to be successful. And so that was a really transformative experience for me. And those are just the ways that I try to heal myself, and feel okay with my queerness and my brownness. And I know that that's the only way that I can be a good partner to my partner, or be a good daughter to my parents, and try to stop this cycle of violence.
Thank you, each of you, for all of the, just all the medicine that you've offered us in the last hour and a half. We have about 3 minutes left. And so I just want to make sure that people know how to stay in touch with you, and to continue to connect with you in your work. So Jonel, how do people stay in touch with you?
So I'm on Facebook. I'm on with my name, Jonel Beauvais, on there. And then you can also add me on there. And we also have the Welcome Home Circle Facebook page. We were very fortunate that someone volunteered to develop our website for us. So we got a really nice website up, and that was really nice of her to help us out in that way. And other than that, I'm also on Instagram, Jonel B27 on there. And then other than that, I don't know, I'll probably cross paths with you if it's meant to be. If you really called me in, I'm pretty sure I would make it there, because a lot of people have called me and I've managed to show up. So we'll figure it out in those ways. But other than that, yeah, that's a good way to connect.
I put my info in the chat. Mirror Memoirs has an Instagram account. It's mirror.memoirs. We're on Facebook under Mirror Memoirs as well. We have a tiered membership structure. So our people who are eligible for core membership are queer, trans, people of color who are child sexual abuse survivors, but our membership is open to anyone who wants to live in a world without child sexual abuse and help build that world together. So you can take our membership survey to join our email list. And I put the new, tomorrow is our board chair's birthday, Luna Merbruja, who is an Athabascan and Mexican young trans femme who is directing the show. And she has put an ask out to help us raise the production costs. So if any of that speaks to you, please help us get the word out. And thank you so much for your support.
Thank you all. You can all follow me at on my Twitter, which is Quiroz_Emilce. Or you can follow us at common_justice on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We also recently launched a podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. The next episode should be launching in the next week or two, so stay tuned if you'd like to hear more voices in the movement to end mass incarceration. And yeah.
Thank you all. This is the last event of the Abolitionist Storywork convening, but it is not the end of this project. It's actually the beginning of this project. And so you will be hearing from us again soon about other opportunities to engage in this work. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Aisha to close this out. Oh, you're still muted.
Zoom times. A very brief closing after that, while I'm nourished and cleansed and washed in all the many things that reflect renewal and a lot of thinking following that. So Amita, Emilce, Jonel, thank you for your vulnerability, for your honesty, for your guidance and your insight. Thank you, Piper, deeply for your light and for bringing all of the guides to us. And I'm a little emotional. That was very incredible. It was an incredible conversation. So thank you all. A special shout out also to the LP team helping coordinating this, Atue, Emma, Tiara, all the other folks. It takes a team to make all of this possible. Also, thank you to everyone who's joining us, whether it's today or over the past 2 days. I hope you also will take away some of what you learned and heard back to your communities as we all have to collectively work towards building a more just future. We can't do it alone, which has been deeply expressed in this panel and echoed throughout. And so as shared, we will be sharing the recordings this conversation and all the previous ones as well, and invite you to stay up to date again with all of these incredible folks on this session, as well as LP and Piper Create Forward. We'll continue to share out more information, amplify, and make sure everyone knows the work that's happening here right now. So thank you, and truly deeply appreciate each of you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Be well.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.